Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. So today we'll see how to do validation on the request object. We'll create Spring Boot application from start.spring.io. So I'm giving this one is Agetech and artifact name validation, and we'll add the dependencies. So one is the web and one is for Lombard, and this example we'll do in H2 database. So we'll take H2 database and JPA. Okay, now we can generate this project. So project is generated, you can import into IntelliJ ID. Our use case is, so whenever you are implemented REST API, so when client is trying to invoke these APIs, we need to validate the request before processing those requests. So we need to validate both, like the request is valid request, and the fields whatever using inside the request, those are all valid, having valid inputs or not, we'll check. So I have imported that project into IntelliJ ID. We'll quickly open IntelliJ ID. Yeah, this one. If you see that pom.xml file, so here I'm added JPA web S2 database Lambda. Apart from that, there is a one more dependency is required for validation. Starter validation. Spring hyphen boot hyphen starter hyphen validation. So this is a one more dependency is required. You can add this dependency in the form.xml file. So our dependencies are looks fine now. Now we'll try to add database properties quickly to application.properties file. So this video we are performing on H2 database. So I have added H2 database properties. Username is here, password is password, and this is a text db is my schema. So now we'll create the required packages for this one. So we'll create one controller. So here I created controller package. Next service, and next we'll create one entity. Next we'll create one repo. So these are the packages. Now we are dealing with request, right? So for that one, we create one more package, request, or you can use DTO also. So in the request, first we'll create the request object for this one. So for that one, we'll use user request. So this is the class. In the user request, we'll create user ID, name, email, age. We'll quickly add these properties into user request class. So user request is ready. If you see, I'm added name, email, gender, age, nationality. So in the first field, I'm doing natal check. Second one, I'm checking annotation email, is that correct format or not. And third one also I'm applied like not null condition, and age I'm checking minimum 18, maximum 60. And fourth one I'm checking with black. Okay, so these are the validation I'm keeping in the request. Now we'll create one controller, one service, one repository. First we'll create repository for this one. So for that one, you can go to that Java class, you can select this interface. Then our repository is user repository that extends JPA repository. So we need to pass. So still we not yet created the entity. Let me create the entity first. So entity is user. So in the user entity, we'll give these properties same what we are using in the request, user request, and we'll try to create it. So just I'll remove this and convert this one as a entity. To convert this one entity, we can use annotation entity and annotation data annotation all argument constructor. Okay, so this is about user entity. Now we can define id to generate auto incremented value. So here strategy equal to generated type identity. So this is my entity class. It is also ready now. Now we'll give one more id for this to auto generated id. Okay, so this is the id, name, email, gender, age, nationality. Okay, so now this is the repository. We can use user comma integer. Now our repository also ready. Now we'll create one service for this. Right click on this service packages and click on this Java class. Now we'll create user service. So in the user service, what we'll do, we'll save the user details into the database to make this one as annotation service. Now we can create one save operation public. So we are using user save user. So here we need to pass user as a input. So once user is passed, we can use a repository to save this one. So user repository. So I'm creating object for user repository using annotation auto-where. Now we can call the user repository here, user repository dot save of user. So it will save this user into database. So now I created one save user, and also will create one get also to retrieve the user information. Okay, so we can use list of users, get all users is a method. Here there is no input for this, just you can call the user repository find all method. It will return all the available users from table. Okay, so this is also done. And next, if you want to do any update operation, you can create like update, and based on the id you can get the existing user, then you can perform the update operation on that. Next, you can keep it as simply. So I've created one save user, another one is get all users. Let me create controller class for this. So controller class is user controller. So in the user controller we'll create two APIs. One is for create user, another one for retrieve user. So public user create user. So create user is expecting user request object, annotation request, then user request user request. So it is expecting request body, annotation request body user, it is expecting. Okay, to make this one as a REST endpoint, you need to use annotation REST controller on the class level, and one more annotation request mapping also required. And you can give this one as API, and this one you can create as a annotation post mapping slash user. Otherwise directly you can give user here, and here no need to specify anything. We'll use directly post mapping, and we'll call this API directly slash user. It will execute this create user, and it will return the data. Now what we need to do, now we need to validate this request object is getting valid request or not. For that one we can use the annotation valid. So it will check this request user is valid request user or not. And also we need to use one more class to handle valid to handle this validation, and one more binding results. What it will do, it will hold the errors. If this user request is having not valid, then it will hold the validation errors. If this result is having have the error, then we are creating this one map and setting all the fields into that map and returning to the response. Okay, if everything is fine, then we'll simply return user is valid. Okay, so if this valid user is valid, then only we'll call to the service to save the data. Okay, so once it is valid user, then we'll call to that service. What is the service we are using? So user is the entity. You can create object for user. User is equal to new user, and we can set all the requested fields. This is the requested fields coming from user request. We'll set first, we can fill into this user. Okay, so you can go to the user all argument constructor and annotation, no argument constructor also need to specify. Now come to the controller. Now you can set these values. User dot set name from user request dot get name. We need to set all the fields. User dot set age, user request dot get age, user dot set email, user request dot get email. Here user request is missing. User request email is done. User dot nationality and age, user request dot get nationality. 1 2 3 4 are done. What else is missing? 1 2 3 4 5. Age is missing. Age is done. Age, name, gender. Okay, so we need to set gender also. User dot set gender, user request dot get gender. Now we can call this service. So for that one, first we need to create the object for service class. What is the service we are using? User service. So you can create object for this one using annotation auto wire. Now we can call this user service dot, what are the method available? Save user. So here we can pass user as an input. See, now I'm calling this save user. So save user call to the repository, and finally it will save data into that H2 database. So this is our service. So this is our flow. So how we are handling the request validation here, using this annotation value and binding result into this class, and here we are checking that result is valid result or not. If that result is having any error, then simply we are returning back to that client. If this requested fields are valid and the request also valid request, then we'll processing our request, then finally we'll return this response. Okay, so for this one, and we need to create one more API for that get we missed. Okay, we'll create one more API for the get quickly. Public list of string, list of user, get all users, user service dot get all users. So directly it will return all the available users. Now we can define this is annotation get mapping. So here also I am not specified anything, just we are using the API endpoint like /user. If you perform the post operation, this API will execute. If you perform the get operation, this API will execute. Okay, so now we'll start this service. Before starting the service, just you can cross check your added H2 database related properties or not. Okay, now we can go to that main class and run this application now. So I'm added one dependency in the form.xml also for H2 database. Now we'll see how this data will show into that H2 database. So this port number 80 already used. Okay, I'll change my port number. I'll change to 9898 and I'll restart this application. Okay, so I added this annotation table. Now application is started successfully. Now we'll see H2 database console. HTTP localhost 989x h2 console. This is our H2 database console. That username is SA, password is password only. I'm connecting to the database. So now if you see, user table is created. Select start from users, run this one. There is no data in the user table. Okay, now we'll try to test this one through Postman. So go to the user controller. So here /user is the endpoint and user request is the inputs. I need to pass name, email, gender, age, nationality. Okay, so here is my Postman. So first we need to perform post API. So for this post API, so we'll give some wrong email ID for this. For example, I am giving some text. Okay, there is not the red symbol. So if you are hit this API and if you see, it is showing invalid email address. Why? Because we are mentioning annotation. We are mentioned validation on the user request. If you have come to that user request class here, so if you see this email, we are using annotation email. So at the same, we can remove this nationality. So now we can try. Now it is showing two validation errors. One is nationality must not be blank. So here also we are applying below 18. For example, I give it 16. If you have submit this request, then it is showing three validation errors. Okay, now we'll enter all this correct information and try to test this one. So nationality India and email ID ajtech at gmail.com. So we'll try to submit this one. Now it is showing valid, user is valid. So now we can run this query one more time to check how many records available in this table. Now only one entry is available, ajtech at gmail.com. Okay, now we'll try to insert one more name is equal to, I'll use something like ram and email id ram at gmail.com and mail is having age 30. Now we can try to insert one more user. User is again valid user. Now you can go to the Chrome and you can run this. Now two entries. Okay, so what we are doing here, once all this having correct information, means all this validations is passed, then only we are storing data into the database. If you go with that user controller, so here we are using the user request annotation valid and we are handling that errors, validation errors, and if it is there any invalid validation, then it will return to that back to the client. If all the validations is successfully valid, then we are creating the user and saving into the database. Okay, so this is related to save operation. Same like you can perform the get operation, means read operation. So we are using http method as get. You can send this one. Now you can see two entries available in the database. Here I have created two more APIs. One is for get user by ID, another in delete user by ID. So if the user is not found in the database, it will throw the custom exception, user not found exception. This exception I have created in the exception. Okay, so in the same way, if you see the delete user also, delete user by ID, the user is not found, again it will throw the exception. Okay, now we'll create API in the controller also for this. So these two are public user get user by ID. Here you can pass annotation request. You can pass annotation request param, or you can use annotation path param. So we'll annotation path variable or request param, anything you can use. So you can see the integer. So what is the ID you need to pass? So now we can call the service. So user service dot get user by id. Here you can pass the id as an argument, so it will return user. So this is for annotation. Get mapping will use forward slash, this is id. Okay, same way we need to create delete also. So in this case you can use annotation delete, annotation delete mapping, and you can pass id. Based on the id will delete. Get delete user by id. Here you can call delete user by id. So here we are not returning anything, so we will mark as white. Can go here, we are returning the white. Come to the controller, this return statement is not required. See, there is a two more apis we implemented. Now we will see this apis also how it will work. So here I created one custom exception using user not found exception. Go to that h2 database. So this h2 database is logged out once you service is down, or once the session is expired. So but this h2 database is very helpful if you want to do testing service in your local. So I'm again restarting the service now. Okay, again it is using, might be invalid mapping pattern id, somewhere we are missing some id. Yeah, it is not correct here. Then save. So apart from these custom exceptions, also you can use the annotation global exceptions and the annotation exception handler also. So if you come and you can go to that 8080 h-console. So this is my h2 database. So I have logged in now, and if you see here we have the user table, and you can just see is there any data into that user table. So as of now, no, nothing is there. So I'll first insert few entries using this. I'm using post. I'm inserting some data. So data is inserted, and one more like htech, and I'll insert this entry also. Okay, two entries are inserted. Now we can perform get operation based on the id. If you want, you can check in the database. You can perform this select star from users. You can see two entries, employee id 1 and user id is 1 and 2. Okay, so if you access with 1, this is the path variables, you need to pass /1, and you can hit this one. Now you can see, so user 1 is retrieved. If you have changed this one to 2, you can able to access user 2. If you want to access both, then you can directly go with this API, so it will return all the list of users available into the table. Now we can try with the delete. So if you want to try the delete, I want to delete user id 1. You can run this one. Now there nothing is written because I am not returning anything. You can go to the database and you can run this query. Now see, user id 1 is removed. So like this you can perform exception handling. So in this user service I added exception like if the user is not found, then it will give user not found exception. Okay, so if you want to try that one, you can go. If the user id is, I'll give like 5, this id is not available, then if you see internal server it is given, but when I come into this, so user not found exception. Okay, so this one you need to pass the client, and the client will handle this user not found exceptions. So if you want to try with get also, you can try. Go to the get and pass the same id. So there is no user, so it is showing internal server error. But if you come into the logs, if you see here, it will show you user not found, not found. So you need to pass this one to the controller. From the controller you need to handle the proper status codes, then you can give response to the client with the proper information. Like this you can do the exception handling. I hope this video is helpful for you. Please like, share and subscribe my channel.